Here we are going to discuss about Oedipus the King, episode 1. It is in CU NSOU IGNOU RBU and other universities. The story about Oedipus the King. A plague is striking Thebes. The citizens gather outside the state streets. They discuss about the impending calamity that has fallen onto the city, and yet they do not know way out to get out of this calamity. But there is some reason behind it. The reason may be very much heavenly, and it must have happened from the heaven, and somehow it is godly curse that has fallen on them, and they know that this godly curse has created such a confusion into their lives that it might bring a total disaster amongst themselves, and yet they have to bear the disaster as it has fallen on them. So we find them that they are so perturbed by this plague. The plague has taken tolls of lives, and people have died quite unknown of the fact of what has really happened to them, why this impending death has gripped them all, who is responsible, in what manner is he or she responsible, who has brought about the plague. Now, this plague, a plague is striking Thebes, Thebes. The citizens gather outside the palace of the king, Oedipus asking him to take action. Oedipus replies that he already sent his brother-in-law Creon to the oracle at Delphi to learn how to help the city. Creon returns with a message from the oracle. The plague will end when the murderer of Laius, Laius, former king of Thebes, is caught and expelled. The murder is within the city. Oedipus questions Creon about the murder of Laius, who was killed by thieves on his way to consult an oracle. Only one of the fellow travelers escaped alive. Oedipus promises to solve the mystery of Laius' death, going to curse and drive out the murderer. Oedipus sends for Tiresias, the blind prophet, and asks him what he knows about the murder. Tiresias responds, cryptically lamenting his ability to see the truth when the truth brings nothing but pain. At first, he refuses to tell Oedipus what he knows. Oedipus curses and insults the old man, going so far as to accuse him of the murder. These taunts provoke Tiresias into revealing that Oedipus himself is the murderer. Oedipus naturally refuses to believe Tiresias' accusation. He accuses Creon and Tiresias of conspiring against his life and charges Tiresias with insanity. He asks why Tiresias did nothing when Thebes suffered under a plague once before. At that time, a sphinx held the city and captive and refused to leave until someone answered a riddle. Oedipus brags that he alone was able to solve the puzzle. Tiresias defends his skills as a prophet, noting that Oedipus' parents found him trustworthy. At this mention of his parents, Oedipus, who grew up in the distant city of Corinth, asks how Tiresias knew his parents. But Tiresias answers enigmatically, then Therefore, then before leaving the stage, Tiresias puts forth one last riddle, saying that the murder of Laius will turn out to be both father and brother to his own children and his son of his own life. After Tiresias leaves, Oedipus threatens Creon with death or exile for conspiring with the prophet. Oedipus's wife, Jocasta, also widow of King Laius, enters and asks why the men shout at one another. When Oedipus explains to Jocasta that the prophet has charged him with Laius' murder and Jocasta replies that all prophecies are false. As proves she as proof, she notes that the Delphic oracle once told Laius he would be murdered by his son, when in fact his son was cast out of Thebes as a baby, and Laius was murdered by a band of thieves. A description of Laius' murder, however, sounds familiar to Oedipus, and he asks further questions. Jocasta tells him that Laius was killed at a three-way crossroads just before Oedipus arrived in Thebes. Oedipus, stunned, tells his wife that he may be the one who murdered Laius. He tells Jocasta that long ago, when he was the prince of Corinth, he overheard someone mention at a banquet that he was not really the son of the king and queen. He therefore traveled to the oracle of Delphi, who did not answer him, but did tell him he would murder his father and sleep with his mother. Hearing this, Oedipus fled his home, never to return. It was then on the journey that to take him to Thebes that Oedipus was confronted and harassed by a group of travelers whom he killed in self-defense. This skirmish occurred at the very crossroad where Laius was killed. Oedipus sends for the man who survived the attack, a shepherd, in the hope that he will not be identified as the murderer. Oedipus, the palace, a passenger approaches Jocasta and tells her that he has come from Corinth to inform Oedipus that his father Polybus is dead, and that Corinth had asked Oedipus to come and rule there in his place. And Jocasta rejoices, convinced that Polybus's death from natural causes has disproved the prophecy that Oedipus would murder his father. At Jocasta's summons, Oedipus comes outside, hears the news, and rejoices with her. He now feels much more inclined to agree with the queen in deeming prophecies worthless and viewing chance as the principle governing the world. But while Oedipus finds the great comfort in the fact that one half of the prophecy has been disproved, he still fears the other half, the half that claimed he would sleep with his mother. The messenger remarks that Oedipus need not worry because of Polybus and his wife, Merope, are not Oedipus's biological parents. The messenger, a shepherd by profession, knows firsthand that Oedipus came to Corinth as an orphan. One day long ago, he was tending his sheep when another shepherd approached him him a baby carrying a baby, its ankles pinned together. The messenger took the baby to the royal family of Corinth, and they raised him as their own. That baby was Oedipus. Oedipus asks who the other shepherd was, and the messenger answers that he was a servant of Laius. Oedipus asks that this shepherd be brought forth to testify, but Jocasta, beginning to suspect the truth, begs her husband not to seek more information. She runs back into the palace. The shepherd then enters. Oedipus interrogates him, asking him, gave, gave him the baby. The shepherd refuses to disclose anything, and Oedipus threatens him with torture. Finally, he answers that the child came from the house of Laius. Questioned further, he answers that the baby was, in fact, the child of Laius himself, and that it was Jocasta who gave him the infant, ordering him to kill it, as it had been prophesied that the child would kill his parents. But the shepherd pitied the child and decided that the prophecy could be avoided just as well as if the child were to grow up in a foreign city, far from his true parents. The shepherd therefore passed the boy on to the shepherd in Corinth. Realizing who he is and who his parents are, Oedipus screams that he sees the truth and flees back into the palace. The shepherd and the messenger slowly exit the stage. A second messenger enters and deciphers scenes of suffering. Jocasta has hanged herself, and Oedipus, finding her dead, has pulled the pins from her robe and stabbed out his own eyes. Oedipus now emerges from the palace, bleeding and begging to be exiled. He asks Priam to send him away from Thebes and to look after his daughters, Antigone and Ismene. Creon covetous or royal power is too all too happy to oblige. Oedipus. So this is the beginning of the Oedipus story. Now we'll go forward with Oedipus the King, episode 2, which is also included in the universities. So here we'll first explain ourselves of the many unexplained lines and expressions as if it is mentioned in the book. What we will find? We will find the reality of the situation very clear to us, and then, of course, we will discuss about what has really happened. Now, first one is fear. What should a man fear? It is all chance. Chance rules our lives. Not a man on earth can see a day ahead, groping through the dark. Better to live at random, best we can. And as for this marriage with your mother, have no fear. Many a man before you in his dreams has shared his mother's bed. Take such things for shadows, nothing at all. Live, Oedipus, as if there is no tomorrow. Oedipus, the king, 1066 to 1078. The audience familiar with the Oedipus story almost does not want to listen to these self-assured lines spoken by Jocasta, wherein she treats incest with a startling lightness that will come back to haunt her. What makes these lines is tragic is that Jocasta has no reason to know that what she says is foolish, ironic, or simply wrong. The audience sense of the work of the faith in this play has almost entirely to do with the fact that Oedipus story was an ancient myth, even in 5th century BC Athens. The audience's position is thus most likely that of Tiresias, and full of the knowledge that constitutes to bring it and others pain. At the same time, it is important to note that at least part of the irony of the passage does depend on the play and the audience faulting Jocasta for her blindness, her claim that chance rules our lives and that Oedipus should live as if there is no tomorrow seems to fly in the face of the beliefs of more or less everyone in the play, including Jocasta herself. Oedipus would not leave, would not have sent Creon to the oracle if we believe events were determined randomly. Nor would he have fled Corinth after hearing the prophecy of the oracle that he would kill his father and sleep with his mother. Nor would Jocasta have found her baby's ankles and abandoned him in the mountain. Again and again, this play and the other Theban plays returns to the fact that prophecies do come true and that the words of the God must be obeyed. What we see in Jocasta is a willingness to believe oracles only as if it suits her. The oracle prophesies that a son would kill Laius, and so she abandoned the son in the mountains. When Laius was not, as she thinks, killed by his son, she claimed to find the words of the oracle worthless. Now she sees Oedipus heading for some potentially horrible revelation and seeks to curb his fear by claiming that everything a person does is random. People of Thebes, my countrymen, look in Oedipus. He solved the famous riddle with his brilliance. He rose to power, a man beyond all power, who could behold his greatness without envy. Now, what a black sea of terror has overwhelmed him. Now, as we keep our watch and wait the final day, count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last. So, these words spoken by chorus from the conclusion of Oedipus the king That Oedipus solved the famous riddle of the Sphinx, which is brilliance, is an indisputable fact, as is the claim that he rose to power, to an inviolable greatness. In understanding these facts, the chorus seems to suggest a casual link between Oedipus' rise and his fall. That is, Oedipus fell because he rose too high, because in his pride he inspired others to envy. But the casual, but the causal relationship is not actually established. Ultimately, all the chorus demonstrates is a progression of time. He rose to power, no man beyond all power. Now, what a black sea of terror has overwhelmed him, they say. These lines have a ring of hollow and terrifying the truth to them, because the comfort of an audience expects in a moral is absent. In absence, they say, Oedipus tell for this reason, now you know how not to fall. So, if we go with the summary of this detail from lines 1 to 337, we find that Oedipus steps out of the royal palace. Now, what will happen? Something will happen with him, and he'll have to bear the consequences of whatever that happens with him. Thebes and is greeted and is greeted by a procession of priests who are in turn surrounded by the impoverished and sorrowful citizens of Thebes. The citizens carry branches wrapped in wool, which they offer to the gods as gift. Thebes has been struck by a plague. The citizens are dying and no one knows how to put an end to it. Oedipus asks the priest why the citizens have gathered around the palace. The priest responds that the city is dying and asks the king to save Thebes. Oedipus replies that he sees and understands the terrible fate of Thebes and that no one is more sorrowful than he. He has sent Creon, his brother-in-law and fellow ruler, to the Delphic oracle to find out how to stop the plague. Just then, Creon arrives, and Oedipus asks what the oracle has said. Creon asks Oedipus if he wants to hear the news in private, but Oedipus insists that all the citizens hear. Creon then tells what he has learned from the god of Apollo, who spoke through the oracles. The murderer of Laius, who ruled Thebes before Oedipus, is in Thebes. He must be driven out in order for the plague to end. Creon goes on to tell the story of Laius' murder. On their way to consult an oracle, Laius and all but one of his fellow travelers were killed by thieves. Oedipus asks why the Thebans had no attempt to find the murderer, and Creon reminds him that Thebes was then more concerned with the curse of the Sphinx. Hear this. Hearing this, Oedipus resolves to solve the mystery of Laius' murder. The chorus then enters. The chorus in the Greek play, they come out with a basic truth of what has happened. The chorus enters calling on the gods Apollo, Athena, and Artemis to save Thebes. Apparently, it has not heard Creon's news about Deius' murder. It bemoans the state of Thebes and finally invokes Dionysus, whose mother was a Theban. Oedipus returns and tells the chorus that he will end the plague himself. He asks if anyone knows who killed Laius, promising that the informant will be rewarded and the murderer will receive no harsher punishment than exile. No one responds, and Oedipus furiously curses Laius, murderer, and anyone who is protecting him. Oedipus curses himself, proclaiming that should be he discover the murderer to be a member of his own family, then what will happen? That person should be stuck with the same exile and harsh treatment that he has just wished on the murderer. Oedipus castigates the citizens of Thebes for letting the murderer go unknown so long. The leader of the chorus suggests that Oedipus called for Tiresias, a great prophet, and Oedipus responds so that he has already done so. Oedipus is notable for his compassion, his sense of justice, his swiftness of thought and action, and his candor. At this early stage in the play, Oedipus represents all that an Athenian audience, or indeed any audience, could desire in a citizen or a leader. In his first piece, which he delivers to an old priest whose suffering he seeks to alleviate. He continually voices his concern for the health and well being of his people. He insists upon allowing all his people to hear what the oracle has said, despite Creon's suggestion that Oedipus hear the news in private. When Creon retells the story of Laius' murder, Oedipus, shocked and dismayed that the investigation of the murder of a king was so swiftly dropped. Oedipus quickly hatches plans to deal with both his people suffering and Lear's unsolved murder, and he has even anticipated the chorus's suggestion that he sent someone to the oracle and called for Tiresias. Finally, Oedipus is vehement in his promise of dire punishment for Lear's murder, even if the murderer turns out to be someone close to Oedipus himself. Sophocles' audience know that the ancient story of Oedipus well and would therefore interpret the greatness Oedipus exudes in the first scene as a tragic harbinger of his fall. Sophocles seizes every opportunity to exploit the dramatic irony. Oedipus frequently alludes to sight and blindness, creating many moments of dramatic irony, since the audience knows that it is Oedipus's metaphorical blindness to the relationship between his past and his present situation that brings about his ruin. For example, when the old priest tells Oedipus that the people of Thebes are dying of the plague, Oedipus says that he could not fall failed to see this. Oedipus eagerly attempts to uncover the truth, acting decisively and scrupulously, refusing to shield himself from the truth. Although we are able to see him as a mere puppet of fate, at the same point, the irony is so magnified that it seems almost as if Oedipus brings catastrophe upon himself willingly. One such instance of this irony is when Oedipus proclaims proudly, but for the audience painfully, that he possesses the bed of the former king, and that marriage might have been created blood bonds between him and Laius had been murdered. Although the chorus first code piously calls to the gods to save Thebes from the plague, the answer they get to their prayer arrives in a human form. Immediately following the ode, Oedipus takes himself upon himself the role of a god, a role the chorus has been both reluctant and eager to allow him see. Oedipus is so competent in the affairs of men that he comes all closing to dismissing the god, although he does not actually blaspheme as Creon does in Antigone. At this early moment, we see Oedipus' dangerous pride, which explains his willful blindness and to great extent justifies his downfall. Oedipus, the king that we find in lines 338, 706, the body leads in the blind prophet Tiresias. And of course, Tiresias knows the fact very well because he's acquainted with what has happened. But Tiresias answers only that he knows the truth, but wisely he did not. Puzzled at first, then angry, Oedipus insists that Tiresias tell Thebes what he knows. Provoked by the anger and insults of Oedipus, Tiresias begins to hint at his knowledge. Finally, we know that what is now going to happen, and the truth will be out, and Tiresias himself will have to fall into such a situation from where he will not be able to come out because he has already revealed the facts that has already happened. Theresis begins to hint at his knowledge. Finally, when Oedipus furiously accuses Tiresias of the murder, Tiresias tells Oedipus that Oedipus himself is the curse. Oedipus dares Tiresias to say it again, and so Tiresias calls Oedipus the murderer. The king criticizes Tiresias' power widely and insults his blindness, but Tiresias only responds that the insults will eventually be turned on Tiresias by all of the Thebans, driven into a fury by the accusation. Oedipus proceeds to concoct a story that Creon and Tiresias are conspiring against him. That is also his wrong supposition. He has wrongly suspected Creon for creating the situation, whereas Creon in no way is responsible for what has really happened to him. He has to face the truth, but he is very much afraid to face the truth. So we see that the leader of the chorus asks Oedipus to calm down, but Tiresias only taunts Oedipus further, saying that the king does not even know who his parents are. This statement both infuriates and intrigues Oedipus, who asks for the truth of the parentage. Tiresias answers only in riddles, saying that the murder of the Laius will turn out to be both brother and husband to his mother. The characters exit and the chorus takes the stage, confused and unsure whom to believe. So they resolve they will not believe any of these accusations against Oedipus unless they are shown proof. Now here the students are made very conscious of the fact that something will happen and is going to happen, and they must be sure of the immediate crisis that will arise. So Creon enters, soon followed by Oedipus. Oedipus accuses Creon of trying to overthrow him, since it was he who recommended that Tiresias come. Creon asks Oedipus to be rational, but Oedipus says that he wants Creon murdered. So both Creon and leader of the chorus try to get Oedipus to understand that he is concocting fantasies, but Oedipus is resolute in his conclusion and his fury. From here, what we analyze is that, as in Antigone, let us compare. If we have read Antigone, the students have read Antigone, they will understand that what a dramatic irony lies in the blindness that will soon happen or take place. Tiresias matches Oedipus himself for himself. In this respect, in this section, the characteristic scripts of Oedipus's thought, words, and actions begins to work against him. He must understand that Tiresias has said something which was right, but he is not in a position to accept it. He is the cause of the plague in his country, and that he should be held responsible for himself. How will how can Oedipus be made to understand that he can understand how he has been accused of the great plague that has already gripped the reality of the situation, and yet he has to think of the reality that has fallen upon him. And Jocasta tells him that Leah was killed at a three-way crossroad, just tries to justify herself that in no way Oedipus was responsible in killing his father, as it is said that he would kill his father and marry his mother. So you see that Oedipus was confronted and harassed by a group of travelers whom he killed in self-defense at the very crossroads where Laius was killed. But how could this be explained? It was very difficult at this stage to explain it. But here, Oedipus had 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 a skirmish, and then a fight, and then he killed, he did kill his father unknowingly, not knowingly, and yet he's not ready to accept it. He doesn't know how to accept it. So in this section, Jocasta is both careless and maternal. She understands very well that the truth is out. Somehow or the other, somewhere, the truth has been made out, and Oedipus will have to accept the truth at this juncture. He cannot say, no, in no way, he is responsible for the murder of Laius, because he is the person who has made it that situation to arise or take place. So we find that as we proceed with the play, there are many such situations which will tell us how Things were not in the right order. How whatever Tiresias had said was not wrong after all. He was right, but it was very hard to believe. And so Oedipus understands very well that there may be a conspiracy against him. There's a theory of conspiracy that runs with it, but whether it is really a conspiracy or not, if you read the story line by line, which you are expected to read, then you'll understand that there is something wrong with the whole thing. Oedipus the king, he is actually responsible for the death of his father Laius at the crossroads. He must have forgotten now. The chorus knows it very well. The chorus awares us that this is what has happened, but we are not able to believe it. Neither is what Crayon or Oedipus ready to believe it that he is responsible for the death of the father in the crossroads near the jungle, inside the jungle. So, but how to believe it? The girls Antigone and Ismene come forth, crying. Oedipus embraces them and says he weeps for them since they will be excluded from the society because such a relationship, if it is at all proved to be true, naturally the girls will have the effect on them, and naturally the society would disown them, and that would be a great, great thing to happen. So, unity of action in Oedipus the king has already started taking place. Climax anagnosis, as it is said in Greek tragedy, has already reached, and catastrophe will come to an end. Like a triangle which has started will have a 90-degree fall, and Oedipus, whatever wrong that he has done, it will be out, and the people will come to know about him that he is not that honest man as they thought him to be. That somewhere or the other something must have gone wrong. In whichever way it is tried to be hidden, it will not be possible. So you see the entire story, the fate in Oedipus the king, the tragedy of the fate. The fate is an overreaching presence in Sophocles' Oedipus the king. So why? Why? Because that is the way it has to be. And the truth cannot be denied. Truth will have to be admitted, and no one can deny the truth that has really happened or taken place. So many critics have got many explanations for this truth, but this truth is what is truth, and nobody could deny it, not even so anyone, whoever wants to say that Oedipus may be wrong in asserting the fact that has happened, but no, it is not that. It is there. The fate of Oedipus has already started working with him, and he'll have to face the situation. Now he cannot deny that he is in no way responsible for what has happened. He is in some way responsible, maybe not yet revealed, not yet announced, not yet known by the people that what has happened to him, but it is sure and for granted. The story itself says that Oedipus is responsible for the death of his father Laius. Unknowingly, he shouldn't be held totally responsible for what has happened, because the critics say that in no way Oedipus was responsible for the reality that would happen today, and that he would be in such a situation where he'd have to prove himself innocent, because he's cursed right from the birth. Born, when he was born, he was cursed that he would marry his mother, kill his father, marry his mother. So now he cannot escape the truth that has come upon him. The entire story tells us that. You know very well that this Oedipus story is taken by Aristotle in his what we say in his theory, because he believes that Oedipus is the fittest of all that has happened, and all that has happened is goes against Oedipus. Oedipus is very, very difficult to prove that he has not done anything wrong. There is no denial of the fact that his life has turned out to be wrong for no fault of his own, but it was destined. It was destined by fate. Actually, destiny at times do not work with us properly. We destine ourselves and then we cry over it. But how? Why? Because we know that the wrong that has been done cannot be made now right. Now that he has killed his father, we never get him back to prove the real worth of what has happened, how he got involved into it, what were the consequences that brought the death of his father. Of course, it was Oedipus's pride. We often say that it was a pride. The pride had begotten the fall of Oedipus. Yes, it's true. Pride sometimes begets the fall. So it is said that no man should be proud of himself before he knows the actuality of the situation. And it is very difficult for any man to, to disbelieve the fact that in somehow or the other he is responsible for something, the tragedy that has taken place in his life or in his family, and that he should admit it and accept it, and rather than confront with it as Oedipus had been doing it because of his pride, he cannot hold fast to the fact that he is wrong. He thinks that he is right. Others are trying to make him wrong. Why they are trying to do it, that entirely depends on him. He suspects Tiresias is responsible, but in no way Tiresias is responsible for the fall that has fallen on him. Tiresias has only told him the fact, the fact that Oedipus will have to admit, even if he doesn't want to admit because he is the king, how can he think of a fault which will not be accepted by his countrymen? No one will accept him because the fault that has been done or committed by him is something which is unpardonable. Marrying mother, sleeping with her on the bed, and giving birth to children is said to be a very, very serious crime. And if that crime is at all proved to be right, then Oedipus, whatever and in whatever manner he may be great, in whatever manner he may be brave, but greatness and bravery do not count in such situations when you are responsible for the for the unfortunate circumstances that had come upon you. And that is what is the great king Oedipus happened to him. He's a great king, but in no way can you hold him responsible that he is responsible for what has happened to him. No, nowhere. And no, however you say, Oedipus was not knowing before he had taken birth onto this earth that such a situation arrived when he will be held responsible for such an erratic decision that he had taken that has brought a stain to the mother-child relationship. So, if you talk of the character of Jocasta, she is just a moderate and reasonable woman. You cannot blame her skepticism that Jocasta is frankly skeptical of prophecies and therefore is, according to the religious ideas of the time, guilty of irrelevance. He doesn't believe that Oedipus in some way or the other is responsible for the death of his father because his father, it has become, information has come in that the father that reared him from the child to the grown up Oedipus has been killed, is dead. And so naturally, in no way does layers she can hold that layers is responsible, will be responsible, and the death of Deus will be responsible for Oedipus's hand into it. So Jocasta wants to make herself feel that Oedipus is totally free from any moral scruples. But moral scruples, more than that, is what has happened, is the situation that has happened or taken place. It is such a situation that if anybody wills to come out of it, he'll not be able to do it because it is a fact that is in destined right from the birth of Oedipus, that he'll have to suffer for something of which he was himself. He is in no way responsible. We find him that he's suffering a lot. He understands very well that in no way is he responsible. He thinks that Creon is making plans against him to hold him responsible for what has happened. But actually, the Creon is in no way responsible for Oedipus's downfall, which has come to light now. So you see, this story is very complex story, and it is a favorite story of Aristotle. And in his tragedy, he has mentioned the story to us to explain his tragic theory of law, of prophecy, of divinity that will fall on you, even though you may not be responsible to it, but that has will come upon you because in the seven against Thebes Ascylus lines in 745. For thrice Apollo spoke this word divine, from Delphi's central shine to Laius, die thou childless, thus alone can the land wheel be won. But vainly with his wife desire her strove, and gave himself to love, for begetting by Oedipus by whom he died, the faithful parricide, killing of the father, is not only acceptable and by the son, but the son is in no way responsible for what has happened. Huh? The son is in no way responsible for what has happened, and it has happened because it will happen, and it will happen because destiny has made it happen, and in no way can this destiny be avoided. So when you discuss about the role of the faith in King Sophocles and Oedipus Rex, of course, we are reading Oedipus the King. Even in Oedipus the Rex, the same thing is there. It's continued. And we should know a little bit of Oedipus the Rex because it is also said to be the denouement of the story, the end of the story of Oedipus's fall. What has Oedipus fallen from? From his own mistakes? No. Mistakes that he is destined, yes, before his birth, he was destined to be a very unpardonable man. But in no way was he responsible for the mistake that he has done, slept with his mother, and that was a, a grievous mistake that he had done. In no way is he responsible. You can't hold him responsible, but the fate, the destiny, the fate that is awaiting him to make him responsible for what he had done. So Oedipus' story is a very sad story for the students of literature. Those who will study Aristotle's poetics will have to study this truth because this truth holds in Oedipus very well and perfectly holds because in no way can this truth be avoided and said that Oedipus has done the right thing. No, Oedipus doesn't know what he has done. First of all, the question of being right or wrong does not arise. It only arises if you have done it. and you know that you're responsible for it. But Oedipus doesn't know anything of his responsibility that has fallen upon him. And naturally, he is held responsible for something of which he is not at all aware of, and that has happened, that took place. And now he has to suffer. He leaves the country, his eye gouged with the hairpin of his mother, and his sisters, they are also in a great trouble. So, you see, the basis of the myth is recounted in some extent in Homer's The Odyssey also. You'll find the myth is there. The myth has become a very common myth among the students of English literature and all the scholars who study English literature and Aristotle, and they prove that in no way Aristotle is wrong in determining the factors that has brought Oedipus to such a situation that he will have to face the truth of his innocence. Innocence, why I say, because Oedipus was not at all responsible for what has happened. So that is innocence, I mean to say. Oedipus, what has happened to him has happened innocently. In no way was he responsible for that what's going to happen. In no way was he responsible for killing his father, whom he knew not, at the crossing of the forest, and where he had to face his father, challenge his father, kill him, and be responsible for his death. So, this is the story of Oedipus the king. Students are required to read it very thoroughly, not to spend enough time in just going to the story. No, not that will not help you at all. You need to understand the story, why the story has been included in Aristotle's Poetics, why it is there in every theory that this